It was in that imaginary Orwellian year of 1984. And there was a flight. It was a flight of Avianca Airlines. A jet. It crashed in Spain. Flew, as far as we could tell, straight into a mountain. And of course, investigators studied the accident site, recovered the proverbial black box, and they made an eerie discovery. The black box from the wreckage of that Boeing aircraft had contained in it a voice recorder which revealed the several minutes before the fatal impact. And the first thing that the investigators heard was a shrill, sort of computer-synthesized voice from the plane's automatic warning system, and it told the crew in English, they were a Spanish crew, it told the crew in English, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up. And then, astoundingly, the voice of the pilot was heard, snapping back, shut up, gringo. And he switched the system off. In a matter of minutes, the plane smashed into the side of a mountain and everybody was instantly killed. As I read about that a number of years ago in connection with a book I was writing on the vanishing conscience, it struck me that that is in some ways a parable of the way modern people treat the warning system that God's put in their souls. God has given us some very, very gracious gifts. And one of them is conscience. And we hear about it. There are little phrases of guilty conscience, etc., that we often perhaps use or hear used. But I think the conscience is one of the least understood gifts that God has granted to us, one of the least understood areas of biblical teaching, and I want to draw your attention to it. Maybe to give you a parallel is a good place to begin. You also have another system in your body. It's called pain. It's very helpful. It is very helpful. It's a warning system. It's exactly what it is, and it's designed to tell you that something is wrong with you physically. And if you just continue to override that pain, you will do permanent damage to yourself. One of the most interesting diseases that I've ever read about is leprosy. I mean, I like you, grew up as a little kid hearing all about lepers, in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and how Jesus healed the lepers. And I remember hearing that lepers were people who had no ears and no noses and no chins and no fingers and no toes and sometimes no feet, and the hands were nubs, and that leprosy eats away the perimeter of your body. I found out a lot later by doing some reading on it that leprosy doesn't eat anything. Leprosy is a nervous disease. A nervous system disease. It destroys your nerves, so you can't feel anything, so you rub off your nose, and you rub away your chin, and you rub off your ears, and you rub off your fingers and toes because you cannot feel, you cannot sensitize the level of pressure, the degree of pressure that's being applied, and you literally start erasing yourself. You can thank the Lord that you can feel pain. That's a gift that God has given us to warn us when we are doing damage to our bodies. And conscience, like that, is the same kind of warning system that God has given to us to tell us when we're doing damage to our souls, when we're doing damage to the spiritual part of us. In Romans chapter 2, it says, the Gentiles, verse 14, who do not have the law, do instinctively the things in the law, these not having the law are law to themselves, verse 15, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, and I want to get to this part, their conscience bearing witness. The conscience is a witness, and it has two functions. It either, according to that verse, in their thoughts, accuses or excuses. It either indicts you or it defends you. It either says this is good for you or this is bad for you. It is the most important warning system because it's dealing not with the outside, but with the inside. To do anything to make conscience function less than perfectly is to engage in soul-destroying activity. The wisdom of our day wants to render the conscience ineffective. The enemy, the god of this age, who develops the system that surrounds us in the world, wants us to ignore conscience and misinform conscience. Conscience may be saying, pull up, pull up, pull up, while the culture is saying, shut up, gringo, and turning off the switch. It may be contemporary modern psychology that says man is basically good, and to have a guilty conscience is to fail to recognize the necessity you have for feeling good about yourself and having self-esteem. It may be just a reversal of all moral values. It may be the idea that guilt is toxic or whatever. But we live in a society that's trying to do two things, and I just want you to think about these two things. One, misinform conscience, and two, shut it off. There were two things happening in that airplane. One thing that was happening was radar was finding a mountain, right? Radar was sending out a bounce-back signal that was informing that warning system that there was a mountain. Radar was articulating reality. And then there was the responding warning system that told the pilot what to do in face of that reality. Only two things needed to happen to save the lives of those people. One, you had to know what was reality, and secondly, you had to accept the warning. Sanctification functions on those same two principles. Starts with knowing the truth. Your conscience has to be fully informed about the truth in order to properly warn you. The conscience is the soul reflecting on itself. It is at the core of what distinguishes human beings from animals. No ape ever made a resolution. This is what it is to be self-conscious, self-aware, reflecting on ourselves. It is our own innate ability to understand what is right and what is wrong, and to make determinations to do what is right and not what is wrong. When the conscience functions as it should, when it's violated, it produces shame, regret, guilt, fear, anxiety, disgrace, anguish, and sometimes even depression. Now, conventional wisdom would say, you better go see a counselor. I'm afraid some people in the evangelical world would say, if you have shame, regret, guilt, fear, anxiety, disgrace, anguish, and depression, you better go see a Christian counselor. There's going to be a quasi-medical or psychological explanation for everything, but this does damage to sensibilities. And it's tantamount to saying to your conscience, shut up, gringo, flipping the switch. In fact, you can get so good at it, Paul says in Philippians 3:19, that with some people, this is really amazing, their glory is in their shame. Boy, now you know that thing is not functioning at all. Their glory is in their shame. Look at the MTV generation. What are they proud about? How base can you get? You think that's new? Go back and read Isaiah 5, where they substitute good for bad and bitter for sweet. The mind and the conscience, Titus 1:15 says, can become totally defiled. When that happens, there's really no way back. And I've often thought, too, that you can even sit in a place and hear preaching and teaching, and the same sun that melts the wax hardens the clay. If you keep listening and keep listening and keep listening and keep denying the role that your conscience plays, you're going to get very good at becoming hard. Now, let me tell you about the conscience. The conscience is not the light. Okay? The conscience is the skylight through which the light shines. The light is divine truth. The conscience is just the mechanism through which that truth comes. If it gets dirty, the truth doesn't come through clearly. Now, there are two ways to halt your spiritual progress. One is misinformation. You got the wrong radar. I would like to think that for me to do something against what I know my Lord wants me to do would make me vomit. But I'm going to have a conscience that is literally captive to that truth. Let me define conscience for you. It is the soul's warning system. It is the gift of God. It plays a critical role in salvation and sanctification. It senses moral violation when rightly informed and says, pull up, pull up, pull up, or you're going to crash. You know, when disaster comes, it's not the beginning of anything. It's the end of a long process of ignoring your conscience.